Hello my friends, Jerry Rosa here in the Rosa String Works workshop, and I have only one question for you, and that is, where on this big wide world globe that we live on, this giant third rock from the sun, where could you possibly get a deer antler mandolin saddle, left-handed, radiused with grooves? Is there any more obscure mandolin saddle made anywhere in the world? A left-handed, radiused deer antler mandolin saddle with grooves. We're going to go make it right now. Come along. Well, the first step in making a left-handed radiused mandolin saddle out of deer antler with grooves, the first step is you got to get a piece of deer antler. And I'm very lucky, my wonderful viewers send me deer antler all the time. And for the record, the only part of the antler that I can really use to make saddles is the very base of the antler. So the more of the base I can get, including the skull cap, the better. So in case you're wanting to send me some, I will certainly accept them. But always the base of the antler is the main part that I use. Now it doesn't mean the rest of it goes to waste. We'll use those for nuts and sometimes guitar saddles and things like that. But the only part that's solid enough to make this great big type saddle is the base. And then even those, sometimes they're not solid enough. So here we go, we'll see. You can see how they become very porous. This one is fairly solid. There's an outside possibility I could almost get another one out of this, but not very likely. So what I usually do is I take the base and then I just split it right down the center as straight as I can saw it. This one is a little misshapen, so I'm going to go flatten this bottom edge out on the sander. That way I can hold it better on here. I have a friend by the name of Ron who normally makes these saddles for me, and he just makes them in rough form and then I finish them out to the custom order. However, in this particular case, number one, we only usually have him make a couple of left-handed saddles and we're already sold out of those. And number two, he's had COVID and not doing well. He's been in the hospital. He's out now and he is recovering. But anyway, there's no chance of him coming in to make these saddles for me. So I'm going to go ahead and make this one from scratch myself. And again, this will be a left-handed saddle when we get to that point. You can see there how hollow they are and porous they are on the inside. That's why I have to flatten them out as best I can, and then I work off of the outer edge. So I'm going to use this one and try to make the saddle out of this piece here, and we'll go with that. The next step I'm going to do is I'm going to flatten this off even better, because the saw, I got hung up. I didn't realize this was sticking up and it got hung up in the saw. Anyway, and so I got a little bit curvy there instead of straight, so I'm going to have to flatten this out a little bit more.
Song about a horse or two. Well, here's one more and I swear it's true.
This is the old situation where I wish we had smell-o-vision, because this does not smell real good when you're grinding it either. I don't know, it's just a nasty, bad smell. It's not horrible, but it's not good. My wife absolutely hates the smell, I might add. Alright, so I've got this relatively flat. It's still not perfectly flat yet, but it's really hard to sand this. It's harder than you think. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this flat surface now, lay it on here, and then I'm going to grind a pretty good flat surface on the edge. So here we go. While that's not enough, it's good enough to get me going, and it's easier to saw this than it is to grind it. So I'm going to do most of the rest of it by sawing, and then we'll get into the thickness sanding and shaping to the blank. I'm going to start off by just making another cut parallel to this cut, and I'm going to make it plenty wide. You can see here that it's much wider than I need. That's good because you can always go smaller. Getting bigger is really hard to do. You can see there's still a lot of porosity there, and I'm not sure this is going to make one because it was so curved. It's going to be close. I might be able to get it better on this side than on this side, so I have to keep that in mind as I'm making this. What I'm going to do now is square it up a little bit. This was cut on an angle by whoever sent this to me, so this part here is kind of wasted now, so I'm going to go ahead and just have to square it off about there. From my perspective, it's better if you don't saw them off, if you can leave the skull cap attached and saw the skull right between the antlers, saw the skull in half, and you can saw off the rest of the skull, but just leave the base of the skull attached to the antler, and that way you can make it smaller for shipping. This is barely going to work if it works at all. I got to be honest, I'm a little concerned that it's going to work. I'm going to go ahead and cut this to length. I'm going to leave a little extra length for the moment. I have a mark on here. That's how I know that I'm leaving it a little long. It's a little longer than standard, as you can see, and that's a good thing. I think what I need to do is cut it at a slight angle here down to nothing to get the best out of this, though I'm not sure. It's really kind of tough. Each one of these is kind of a decision, and I haven't done one in quite a while because Ron's been doing them for several years. So it's been a little while since I've done one. So I'm a little rusty at it, trying to decide if I really want to do that or if maybe I could just go to the sander and sand this edge heavy down to nothing here. I think that's what I'll try. This stuff generally sands faster on this disc sander than it does on the belt sander. I don't know why that is, but it does.
The finest horse you've ever seen, his name was Phantom 614. A proud young stallion with head held high, his coat like satin under candlelight, his mane and tail, oh how they sheen. His name was Phantom 614.
Okay, now I'm going to try to slice off this rough edge flat and parallel to the other edge. I've gotten rid of most of the porosity, but quite a bit of it's still there, so I don't know. It's still going to be right on the edge of making this. Okay, I'm not 100% sure I'm going to be successful here, but we're going to just knock off a little bit of this. During the sanding, I got a little unsquare, so that's what I was doing there, squaring up this edge. This is the good edge. This is the bad edge because of the porosity. So I'm going to now cut this to approximate width here, or height. I guess this would really be the height. I'm going to get it pretty close. I'm not going to get it perfect. I'm going to still leave a little bit, and I'll sand the rest of it on my thickness sander. Quite a bit more porosity, but there's still some there. The ends are solid and the whole side here is solid. So it'll make one. It just won't be as pretty on that back side there probably. But you can only do what you can do. It's still a little thick too, so we can get rid of some more of that. Nature doesn't give me the perfect material. I just have to make do with what it gives me. All right, well, we'll move over to the sander now and get this blank shaped up.
Just a young man at the time, I knew that one day he'd be mine, and I would ride there like a king, up on the back of 614. The trainer said, son, he can't be rode, but stay away, boy, or you'll be thrown. He said that horse is just plain mean. His name was Phantom 614.
can see, I was shooting for 310 thousandths. There you go, right on the money, to the thousandth of an inch. Okay, so that's the thickness. Now the height is probably off, and that way we can clean up some of the problems areas here with the height too. Of course, I'd like to take it off of this side the most because that's the porous side, but we may have to take it off of both. I'm going to get a left-handed saddle to compare it by here and decide the best way to cut this. Okay, on this left-handed saddle, ordinarily I would turn this rough stuff to the back and on the bottom, but on this one I'm going to take a chance that I can actually cut most of that roughness out. I'm going to take a chance on it. I kind of think I can. It may be a mistake. Yeah, I don't know. I'm probably taking too big a risk doing it that way. Probably ruin what I've got. I better just leave it on there and just use this as the top. This is so beveled. If it wasn't beveled, I would do what I just said. But because it's beveled, I think I'm going to have to grind most of it off of the top side here, or this beveled side. Anyway, I'm shooting for 450 thousandths. My old pattern here is, well, it's 450 and a half, so it's right on the money. Decisions. Shouldn't be this complicated, but when you're working with these kinds of materials and you only get kind of one shot at it, it just takes a little while to do it.
That horse and I, our souls were one. Without any fear, I climbed upon the back of the one they said was me. His name was Phantom 614, a one-man horse to me.
When you're trying to sand these, it's really difficult to hold them sometimes because they're so small. So I've made myself this little deal here. This will help me push it through here much easier and much more safe.
The people would stare as we ride through a sight which few have ever seen. His name was Phantom 614. His name was Phantom 614.
There you go, 450 thousandths right on the money. Now we'll cut it down to the length, and once again we'll try to get rid of the worst end. And I don't know, probably this end, I guess, with there's more porosity there, I suppose. Except that I'm cutting back into the porosity on that end. We'll see. I never think of the length as being quite as critical. You know, I've got a mark here that I can see that I can line this up with and saw it off to length, and I just checked my pattern and it matches, so everything should be good. I'm just deciding if that's the way I want to do it, and I think I do. I think what I'm going to do is trim this edge just the lightest little bit. There you have it, one antler blank to make a saddle out of. All that work just to make a blank. The next operation is I put a little stick here that stops the slide from going any further, and it's also the right distance that way from the blade to cut this perfect little notch in here. So it does two things in one. And so we're going to cut the notch. Now I just have to make sure I cut it on the bottom side, and that's the bottom side. So I'll do this right here. Okay, so now we have the little notch made. Now we're going to round off these ends. I do this rounding by eye right here.
1, 2, 3, 4.
So that's what we're going with. The next step is to drill the holes in the end of this, and I use this little drilling jig. And the first thing I have to do is set the depth to drill down to, because I don't want to drill the holes all the way through mine. I prefer to leave it solid on top. I use this single edge razor blade, and I use the thick part here as my depth gauge. That's where I stop drilling. So I'm almost drilling all the way through, but not quite. I put it there. and then I set my stop on my drill press, and then I test it to make sure, yep, it's going to stop. It's not going to drill all the way through. Then I line this up by eye, basically, is what I do, and it lines up real easy with these holes. It's hard for you to see, but I can line it up by eye and get it pretty darn accurate. Then I just hold it there in place with my thumb and drill it out. There you can see we've got the holes drilled, so we're in good shape. Now we've just got to make the left-handed shape. Now I have to remember this is left-handed. That's the trick to this. Okay, my friends, you can see here that we have two patterns. These are my wooden patterns. This is an ebony one, and that's my right-handed one. That's for right-handed players. This is my rosewood one, and it is for my left-handed players. And I have to remember that. That's why I made them out of two different materials, so I wouldn't have any problem getting them confused. I put my pattern on the pattern side of my little jig here. This little jig was made for me in a machine shop, a high school machine shop, many years ago, 35 years ago or so. A fellow by the name of Don Swires was a friend of my father's, and he ran the machine shop at the high school and, you know, taught machining. Well, anyway, he offered to make this for me. I had one of these out of wood. I made it out of wood, and it worked, but it wasn't nearly as efficient as this. Nowadays, I could make this myself in my own machine shop, but at the time, I didn't have a machine shop. Well, anyway, we're ready to make this now. You can see this is the pointer here. This follows the pattern, and then I just run it into the blade. The trick is getting this set to the right depth, and you can adjust the depth by going in and out, and then I have to put a clamp on this. The depth adjustment I kind of just do by trial and error each time, and the reason you have to do it that way is you think, well, you could just get it set and then know it every time, but you can't, because the blade, you change blades and things are different all the time on this, so you really do have to kind of set it every single time just by eye. This is the furthest edge out, so I often use that as my gauge, and it looks like that's going to get me close, so I'm going to go with that on this first cut and see how that goes, and more than likely we'll have to send it in a little further because I don't think I'm going to cut too deep here. What I often do is just put a little mark there, and that way when I move this, I have that as a reference so I don't go too far, and I can also, if I move it accidentally too far, I can look at that and know where I need to go back to. I'm just moving it in a little bit there. I think that's going to be about right. That's probably like a 32nd of an inch. Like I said, you always just sneak up on these things. You never go all the way at once. Then I wait for the machine to stop, and I check it visually again, and I look at the depth, and I look at the depth, and I can see I'm still not deep enough. Like I said, I always sneak up on them. That's the best way to do these things. And I'll just move it a little bit more. I'm watching my little mark down there so I kind of know where I'm at. Moved it a little bit there. I think that's going to be pretty close, but we'll give it a shot and see. This one's a little trickier than some to set because of the natural antler there, and it's not perfectly square, so it's a little difficult to compare whether I'm deep enough, but I can pretty much tell I'm still not quite deep enough, so I'm going to go a little bit deeper. We'll see how it goes. Well, I believe we're close enough that we can do the rest by hand filing. Now, remember, this is a radiused one. Right now, this is a flat saddle. We don't have a radius on it. And for some reason, I'm really having trouble getting that off of there. It's coming, but very slowly. There it is. Okay. All right, you can see there it cut it out and did a pretty nice job. The back side here is a little rough, but you know, that's just the way it is. That's the way nature makes this stuff. But it's solid all the way down through, and that's enough solid to make it strong enough to work. But now we have to cut a radius on this, and that radius, you know, when I cut those holes, now that I think about it, it wouldn't have mattered if I would have went all the way through, because when we cut the radius, the holes are going to be exposed again. The radius ones, the holes are always exposed. But that doesn't really matter. I always cut the radius last, and so that's what we're going to do right now. All right, I have another very simple little jig. There's a little sled on here where this rides, and I can just slide it into the sander and it will cut the little round radius on the top here. The radius means that it's arched like this, meaning that your fretboard is also arched to match this. So that's what we're getting ready to cut here. Here we go. Cutting the arch obviously, you know, reduces the thickness on the ends, and it also widens these parts. But you know, that's just the way it is when you do this. So I'm just going to, now I'll do the rest of this by hand filing. It's quite a process. Okay, the rest of the process I do right here at the bench. I've got my little vise here, and that's what I use just to kind of hold things. It mostly just use the slot to kind of set things in, and as I file them by hand. I wish I could find some more of these files. Now, you know, I know you can buy these small files everywhere, don't get me wrong. I've got several sets. But this set I bought when I was, you know, first starting out, and they're made in China, it says. But the quality of these is much better than anything I've bought in the last 5-10 years. These are really old. They're 35, 40 years old, and I still use them because they cut better than even the new ones that you buy now. It's just sad that the quality is always just goes downhill, you know, on all the new stuff. But anyway, these still cut pretty good. Not as good as they used to, but pretty good. I just eyeball this and cut it back where it should be. These radius saddles are a lot more work than the other ones. That's for sure. If you're wondering why they cost more, they probably should cost 2 or 3 times more, because they're just a lot more work. But I try not to penalize people for things. And of course the left-handed one, you know, it has to be special handled just because it's left-handed, of course, and we just don't make as many of those because we don't sell as many. But I don't penalize the left-handed folks for that either. Then I round off all the sharp corners and edges so that they don't catch on your hand. We're just about done with it now, except for putting in the grooves, of course. So, left hand radius with grooves made out of deer antler for a mandolin. And I always rub my hands all over them just to make sure I don't feel anything. And then the last thing here I just need to do is clean up these 2 cutouts, these 2 shelves where it sets on the adjusters. I always like to make sure they're good and flat and clean, because the saw does a pretty good job, but it doesn't make them perfectly smooth. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. Now we go to my high-tech grooving pattern here. I've been using this little pattern for grooving these things forever, really since the beginning of time. I have treble and bass written on here, so I know which way to turn it. This is the treble side. So I line it up here, and I basically center it up by eye again. And then I just use my wider pencil, mechanical pencil here, to mark the grooves. And that looks like everything's pretty well centered. Then I just put it back in the vise here. And I use a tri-cornered file for this. And you just have to have a feel for this. I mean, if you just cut deep enough, you just have a triangle, but I don't do it that way. I wallow it out is really what I do. With the little grooves, like this is the small side here, the small strings. So in this case, I do just cut a very light groove. I just cut it where it just goes across the top. And it's lower at the back here. This is the back here by the tailpiece. So I cut a slight angle on it, not a big angle. The bigger strings that are wrapped, I just rock it around like this and cut a kind of a round bottom in it. Then I just look at it up close and make sure it all looks nice and even. And I've done that a million times, so they look pretty even. I just go back over it one more time here and clean it up a little bit if I see anything. This tri-cornered file doesn't get used on the flat, so it's much sharper. And I can use it to clean this up if I need to. Looks really good to me. The last step, well, actually there's two more steps yet. One of them is to put my name on the bottom here. I always label them with my name. So we've got my label on there, Rosa String Works. And then I always take a permanent marker type deal and I write down, this is the E side, so I just write that on there for the customer. So this is E, and then I write down this is G. Now, my guarantee on these is that I'm guaranteeing you this will fit unless it doesn't. That's my guarantee. That's the only guarantee I can make. But it should fit. It fits most mandolin saddles, most mandolin bridges. It doesn't fit every single one out there in the world. I promise you it doesn't. Sometimes you'll have to enlarge the holes a little bit depending on your mandolin. I can only do what I can do, and I make them all standard, and then it's up to you to tweak them if you have to tweak them a little bit. Well, my friends, I hope you enjoyed the opportunity to see how the rarest mandolin saddle in the world is made. These are rare. These are rare as left-handed deer antler mandolin saddles that are radius with grooves. That's how rare these are. Hope you enjoyed it. Please click the thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed yet, what the heck are you waiting for? I'll see you next time.